What's up, guys? Brady here, coming at you with a review of the new Guilt Trip album, Armour of Angels, released about a month ago now, June 5th. Still catching up on some albums that I should have reviewed a few weeks ago, but that being said, and I've said this before, it gives me more time with the record to really appreciate it. I've been really eager to talk about this English hardcore band that I've been listening to quite a bit for the last month. This band's style of metallic hardcore is one that I've especially fallen in love with in recent years, the last 3 or 4 years. Obviously, I have my own band, Old Mentor, that plays a very similar style to this. So if you're a fan of this band, I highly recommend checking that out. I'll make sure to leave a link in the comments. And that gives me kind of an extra dimension of relatability to this album, because one thing I have learned about playing that style is that it is pretty difficult to diversify it among a track list and give it a specific personality. This oftentimes is music that is strictly meant for catharsis and letting out anger and going to the gym and getting a lift in. But the best compliment I can give this record is that it actually manages to have a very distinct and uniform personality to it. It's more than just your straight up gym fuel of metallic hardcore. There's lots of personality littered all over these songs that mostly is manifest in just an overall pretty dark, sinister vibe that presents itself in multiple different ways throughout this album. I think maybe what does it the most would be those moodier, eerier passages, most notably those clean guitars, and also the few instances of clean vocals on here. This is not a genre known for having clean vocals. It's rather unconventional for this band's style, but every instance of clean vocals on this album is fucking awesome. It ends up being the highlight of the majority of the songs that they're on. And those clean guitar parts, whether they're used more prominently on a track like Veins, or if they're kind of just sprinkled in short bursts on other tracks, they bring in a really cool extra dimension of, again, just this dark, eerie, sinister vibe that really gives the album a lot of personality. And I think something else that kind of sets this record apart from maybe some of this band's peers is an underlying nu metal influence. I would not at all describe this record as nu metal, but especially those more melodic parts and even some of the riffing styles among these tracks, they just, to me, give a subtle nod to nu metal. The riffing style, as hardcore influenced and as percussive as it is, it's oftentimes also littered with some harmonics, and not the usual like squealy pinch harmonics that you hear in this style. I mean, those are on here too, but when I say harmonics, for the most part, I mean just straightforward, regular guitar harmonics. The earliest example of that on this record is the main riff on the track Cut From God. It's got a super dynamic riff that is, it's almost back and forth the entire time between those harmonics and then those dissonant chugs. Dirt, the next track, does that too. This is a quality that to me is a very clear, again, subtle nod to late 90s and early 2000s nu metal, because that riffing style and this style of harmonics was very present on, I don't know, the first Disturbed album, the early Slipknot albums. And then, of course, later in the record, you have the track Resurrected, which actually has a guest feature from Sonny of POD, which that is something that I was not expecting to hear on this record at all, but it actually works. For one, Sonny's clean vocals are another instance of just the clean vocals really spicing up some of these songs, but even his more rap-like vocal cadences, I think, really add to the aggression and the hostility of the song.
Vengeance is mine and it's the final call. Send them all to the grave when the bodies fall. Deliver all but the blasphemous. Welcome to the massacre.
And this is coming from somebody that isn't a POD fan. They're generally a band that I dislike. The closer, The Banner of Heaven, has these vocal cadences that are almost slightly rap-leaning. They're still screamed and they still bring that hardcore edge to them, but just in the rhythmic style that is used, it comes off like a little bit of a slight rap influence. And that's something that is very, very hit or miss for me. Oftentimes, these half-rapped cadence is something I criticize, and I think it sounds awkward. But it really works here. It hits hard. So as a whole, there are a lot of qualities that this album possesses that sets it apart from just being a basic, generic metallic hardcore record, because there's plenty of those. If this record lacked that type of personality, I either would be reviewing it more negatively or I just wouldn't bother reviewing it at all. So I salute this band for still giving this record a bit of distinction and still making it stand out. Now, I know I've spent most of this review so far complimenting the departures on this record, but this album at times is just as good when it does go for that straightforward, jackhammering, vicious, aggressive, metallic hardcore style. Like Blood Atonement track 2 is a highlight for me on this record. It does go for that very straightforward style, but it still has the darkness to it. There's a slight thrash influence in the riffing. The verses really bring the groove. No Love Lost just kicks your head off right away with that vicious scream that is let out immediately, and that really frantic riffing with those discordant drums. I love the use of the pinch harmonics on this song, which again, that is something that's more typical of this style of hardcore, but the band utilizes it very well. It's very memorable. And then I like how also the band really brings in the dissonance on this track, especially near the end. The track Suffer Me has some of the most memorable riffing on the record. It takes a little bit more from a slight djent influence, just how it's a lot more focused on being strictly percussive on this song. And that opening riff is one of my favorites on the entire record. It feels like this giant like tornado swirling around you, especially when you're listening with headphones. And then, yeah, there's the tracks that kind of do a bit of both. They feel like that straightforward hardcore style, but they also sprinkle in some outside influences. Like I already singled out Veins. I love that track. That's a favorite of mine on here. The eerie, clean guitar line that reappears throughout the track is just so memorable. And then once you get past like that halfway mark, the song is just vicious all the way through. The clean vocals are so well executed on this song. They really contribute to the mood, and they do not at all feel like the band is trying to pander or to reach a more melodic audience. Rather, they're used in a way that fits the aggression and the hostility of the record. And especially with this track coming right in the middle, it really, really splits things up. Another huge highlight for me on this record, and maybe my favorite track on here, is Burn. The steamrolling double bass groove in the intro is just absolutely thunderous. The chorus of the song really hammers down with the repetition of just the title, the word burn, and it hits so hard. I feel the aggression more on this track, probably more than any other track on here, especially in that particular moment. Just so fucking vicious. And it makes the track very, very memorable. There's also like a little short, squealy Pantera-esque lead section thrown in there, although I think it's behind some vocals, so it might be a little hard to notice, but look for it on this track. There's a really short but cool clean guitar break in the song that, again, really adds to the personality of the track, and it adds so much of like an extra layer of dynamics. That again, they just really, really add to the aggression. I think the melodic ideas used on this album, like I've said, are used so well. And then just for good measure, there's one of the best breakdowns on the entire record near the end of the song. The song Dirt has great clean vocal parts. This is probably more so than any other moment on here, the clean vocals that bring to mind that subtle nod to nu metal. They give me kind of like a Slipknot Iowa vibe, or maybe a Drowning Pool Sinner vibe, just in the execution of them. They sound really cold, a bit distant, and they have somewhat of a droning quality to them also. And again, it really adds to the mood of the song. I have very few criticisms on this record. I think the track Angel Eyes is maybe the one track that feels a little bit like filler. I still like it. I wouldn't even skip it in the full album context. But that bouncy intro riff is probably the most generic sounding riff on the record. I feel like I've heard that exact rhythm many times before in other albums. But it's a really quick, aggressive, straight-to-the-point song. It's got some tempo changes that hit really hard. And then, obviously, the intermission track. I mean, if you've seen my reviews, if you watch my content regularly, you know what I'm gonna say. I don't think this needed to be its own song. I think these parts would have been sick if they just existed as the intro to another track. Because if I'm listening to this album outside of the full album context, I'm not gonna hear this song. I'm not gonna add this individual interlude track to my workout playlist. So it loses its function in that role. And I think the parts individually are great. So it's more frustrating than anything, but I don't dislike the song yet again. And then a really picky thing that I noticed is on the opener, One by One, which is another song I like. It has a really doomy and really anticipation building, cool, eerie intro. But then when the actual riff kicks in, it just feels a little bit naked because of how saturated that intro was with those eerie melodies. The main riff just being so like straightforward and so like bare bones. It just comes off a little bit naked, like it's missing something. I think the band maybe should have added some more melodies on top of that to just fill it up. And they do end up doing that in kind of the second stanza of it, but it does feel like a slight drop of energy for me, which especially hits because it's the opening track on here. So like you'd think the band would really want to go balls to the wall for the opener. And I don't know, it just left a little bit to be desired. But even that track I still like. Overall, this is a great record. I'm not super familiar with this band, so I definitely have to go back and listen to their back catalog. But I'm very impressed with this one. Production-wise, they sound awesome on here. I really have no complaints there. For all those reasons, I'm going to score this album a 27 out of 30. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to hit subscribe for more rock and metal-related content and album reviews, as well as comment below your thoughts on this record if you've heard it. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.